One of the most famous women in the world was found dead in the early hours of August 5, 1962. Since then, conflicting accounts and conspiracy theories have fought for attention. This is what it was really like the day Marilyn Monroe died. Exactly when Marilyn Monroe died is still unclear. Several key witnesses changed their stories over the years, most notably Monroe's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, who was the first to raise the alarm. Murray said that Monroe went to bed around 7:30 p.m. on Saturday, August 4, 1962, and that was the last time she saw her alive.
She said, "Good night, Mrs. Murray. I think I'll turn in now."
Two other witnesses, actor Peter Lawford, who was the brother-in-law to John and Robert Kennedy, and Joe DiMaggio Jr., Monroe's former stepson, said they spoke to her on the phone around that time, but their accounts of her mood contradict each other. Murray revealed that she knocked on Monroe's door at around midnight, and when there was no answer, she called Monroe's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson. Greenson and Murray went outside and saw through the first-floor bedroom window that Monroe was lying motionless, face down on her bed. Murray and Greenson broke into the room through a window. Unable to rouse Monroe, Greenson called her physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg, who reportedly arrived a little while later. The Los Angeles Times reported that at 4:20 a.m., Engelberg called the police and reported that Monroe was dead.
I suspected that she'd been dead at least a few hours.
The police arrived approximately 5 to 10 minutes later. This account leaves a significant gap between Murray finding the body and the police being called. Murray later changed her story, saying that she found Monroe at around 3 a.m. after noticing light under her bedroom door and being unable to wake her or get into the room. It wasn't until Monday, August 6th, that major newspapers made Marilyn Monroe's death front-page news. Bernie Taupin and Elton John's famous tribute to Monroe, Candle in the Wind, would later claim all the papers had to say was that Marilyn was found in the nude. In fact, the newspapers were at least as interested in another salacious detail, and that was the drugs at the scene. The New York Times, BBC, LA Times, New York Daily Times, and Variety all reported on the empty bottle of Nembutal, a sleeping medication that was found near Monroe's body. According to the LA Times, it had been prescribed by Dr. Engelberg just a few days before her death and had contained 40 to 50 capsules when filled. The New York Times added that the nightstand held 14 other medication bottles. PBS later reported that Monroe was known to regularly mix barbiturates, opiates, amphetamines, and alcohol. By August 6th, the LA County coroner had told the press that an autopsy had shown that Monroe likely died of a drug overdose, and later described her death as a probable suicide. However, medical examiner Dr. Thomas Noguchi, who performed the autopsy, eventually admitted that samples from Monroe's intestines and stomach were lost before they could be put through toxicology tests. This has fueled conspiracy theories, but a 1982 investigation by the LA District Attorney agreed that Monroe's death was likely caused by an overdose, whether intentional or accidental. No one can know exactly what was going through Marilyn Monroe's head in her final moments, but that hasn't stopped plenty of people piling in with their opinions. One school of thought suggests that Monroe was more depressed than ever just before her death. She was divorced from her third husband, Arthur Miller, and during the marriage she had been through several miscarriages. Career-wise, her last two movies had been disappointments at the box office. On top of that, 1961's The Misfits had been tainted by disagreements with Miller, who had written the script. She'd also recently been fired from the movie Something's Got to Give, co-starring Dean Martin. In contrast, some have argued that despite her concerning drug and alcohol use, Monroe was slowly turning a corner. She'd bought her first home in March 1961 and was adding her personal touches to it, planting an herb garden and ordering furniture and tapestries from Mexico. According to the BBC, she and Joe DiMaggio were planning to remarry soon, and she was returning to work on Something's Got to Give. Even the people who were with Monroe or spoke to her on her final day disagreed over her mood and will likely never know what she was feeling. There are many conspiracies surrounding Marilyn Monroe's death. All are far more elaborate than the explanation that the actress accidentally or intentionally overdosed. Possibly the most famous conspiracy involves Robert F. Kennedy, then Attorney General and brother of President John F. Kennedy. The story goes that Monroe had affairs with both Kennedy brothers, and wrote down details and state secrets in a diary that mysteriously went missing after her death.
The Kennedys were a very important part of Marilyn's life.
According to the LA Times, Peter Lawford's ex-wife, Deborah Gould, and private detective Fred O'Tash have both claimed that Robert Kennedy was present the night Monroe died, and an argument between them pushed her to suicide. They said that Lawford, then married to the Kennedy brothers' sister Patricia, helped smuggle Robert back to Northern California to avert suspicion and destroyed evidence. Another conspiracy has Robert, or the mob, murdering Monroe with a Nembutal suppository. Lawford, unsurprisingly, denied these accusations. His fourth wife confirmed that Lawford did work with O'Tash, and he called him the night Monroe died, but she claimed it was regarding Monroe's apparent suicide. Lawford admitted that he spoke to Monroe the night of her death and said that he was gravely worried that she was suicidal, not that she was about to be murdered. Marilyn Monroe had been poised to make a triumphant return to a movie she had previously been fired from when she died suddenly. Monroe could be magic on camera, but capturing that magic was reportedly a grueling process. She had terrible stage fright and anxiety, and struggled to remember her lines. She showed up late if she showed up at all. Her drug and alcohol addictions only exacerbated the issues. In 1962, Monroe was cast in Something's Got to Give, a remake of a 1940 movie opposite Dean Martin. She frequently failed to turn up to set, usually citing illness, the LA Times reports, and Monroe had been ill. After finishing The Misfits 18 months previously, the star had undergone surgeries to treat endometriosis and remove her gallbladder, and had been treated in a psychiatric clinic after divorcing Arthur Miller. On June 1st, Monroe turned 36 on set. On June 8th, having missed 17 of the 30 shooting days so far, she was fired from Something's Got to Give. Fox cited what it called willfully disruptive behavior. However, Monroe's co-star Martin rebelled, refusing to work with any other actress. Monroe took to the press to prove that she was not only capable of working, but a draw for fans. On August 1st, she was rehired to the production. However, when she was found dead on August 5th, the movie was canceled for good. On January 14, 1954, less than 2 years after meeting, Marilyn Monroe and baseball star Joe DiMaggio eloped. However, arguments over her career and inability to conceive saw Monroe file for divorce in October 1954, citing mental cruelty. Despite their short and tumultuous marriage, Monroe and DiMaggio eventually became good friends. When Monroe was admitted against her will to a psychiatric hospital in 1961, she called DiMaggio for help, and he got her out, the New York Times reports. There were also rumors that the couple had planned to remarry before her sudden death. According to the Washington Post, DiMaggio learned of Monroe's death from his sister, who had heard the news on the radio. He immediately flew to LA, collected her body, and took charge of funeral arrangements, with help from Monroe's business manager. DiMaggio spent the night of August 5th sitting with Monroe's body. He even picked out the green sheath dress the icon was buried in. DiMaggio refused to allow many of Monroe's Hollywood connections to attend her funeral, reportedly saying, if it wasn't for them, she'd still be here. Marilyn Monroe met her third husband, Arthur Miller, the year before meeting her second husband, Joe DiMaggio. It was on a movie set in 1951. Miller was married and Monroe was having a fling with one of his friends. 4 years and 1 divorce later, they started an affair. Miller eventually got a quickie divorce in Reno, Nevada, and on June 29, 1956, he and Monroe legally married. The couple had a Jewish ceremony 2 days later, which Monroe had converted for. Sadly, Miller and Monroe's marriage was undermined by his snobbery and her emotional issues. They split while making The Misfits and announced their divorce on November 11, 1960. Miller remarried a year after the separation. On August 6, 1962, the day after Monroe's body was found, the New York Times reported that when Miller was asked if he had a comment on her death, he was typically aloof, saying, "I don't really." Miller was criticized for not attending Monroe's funeral on August 8th. However, in an unpublished essay written that day and made public in 2018, he expressed his anger with the Hollywood elite and executives he felt had destroyed Monroe. In the essay, he expressed a sentiment Joe DiMaggio apparently shared, writing, "Let the public mourners finish the mockery. Most of them there destroyed her." Marilyn Monroe's second and third husbands were famous in their own right. But it was her first husband whose unstarry job meant he was one of the very first people to hear about her death. Monroe married James Doherty on June 19, 1942, less than 3 weeks after her 16th birthday, when he was 21. Back then, her name was Norma Jean Baker. Monroe had been raised by a series of foster families, and they hoped this marriage to a kind neighbor would give her stability. Doherty joined the Merchant Marines in 1944 and was soon dispatched to the South Pacific. In the meantime, Monroe started working on her modeling and acting career. She divorced Doherty in 1946. Doherty remarried soon after and became a police officer in Los Angeles. He was on patrol when a colleague who had been to Monroe's house called to tell him that she was dead. In comments reflecting those of Monroe's other ex-husbands, he told CNN in 2003, "She was such a pure and innocent soul. The movie industry abused her and used her." On August 6th, the New York Times reported that actress Sophia Loren cried when she heard the news. The newspaper also wrote that Kay Gable, whose late husband Clark Gable had worked with Monroe on 1961's The Misfits, went straight to Mass to pray. According to Vanity Fair, author Truman Capote couldn't believe Monroe was dead, writing, "She was such a good-hearted girl. So pure, really. So much on the side of the angels." One person whose response many people were interested in was the wife of the man Monroe had supposedly had an affair with. That would be First Lady Jackie Kennedy. Jackie remained characteristically demure on the subject, at least in public. But after the assassination of her husband on November 22, 1963, she reportedly told a priest, "I was glad that Marilyn Monroe got out of her misery." The day Marilyn Monroe's death made headlines coincided with the 34th birthday of a commercial artist who had long been fascinated by her. Andy Warhol immediately started working on the first of several artworks he made featuring Monroe's image. Back then, Warhol's day job was drawing pictures for ads. In his spare time, he poured his expertise in branding into creating pop art. To Warhol, Monroe was the perfect example of intoxicating Hollywood celebrity, which saw stars repurposed as brands. He was also intrigued by death. Using a publicity still from Monroe's 1953 movie, Niagara, Warhol printed her face 50 times in a grid. The work showed the contrast between Marilyn the movie star, painted to attract attention, and Marilyn the person, always just out of view from her adoring public. Marilyn Monroe was dead, but her famous face would always be frozen in time, never evolving and never forgotten. If you or anyone you know is struggling with addiction issues, help is available. Visit the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration website or contact SAMHSA's National Helpline at 1-800-662-HELP, 4357.